Well, I guess, after the previous two speeches, there's no more need for me to elaborate on the importance of working toward peace. But, as an introductory remark to the whole session, I think I still need to say a few words just to make our panel to progress smoothly. I just like to reiterate that perhaps they already made it very clear, but let me just reiterate here once again. Civilization is a kind of moral high ground, as well as a very, very resilient power. But when we talk about civilization, we're not talking about, the kind of criteria that are derived from one particular civilization. They have to be, all these criteria have to be reworked and reinvented in the course of time. That's why we're gathered here today, to discuss and to explore how peace is at all possible, even under the current circumstances. And, of course, even more importantly, how to actually in practice work toward peace. Popular discourses, including local as well as international discourses, have portrayed Taiwan as a victim. But we, me as well as the previous speakers, as well as I think many of the friends who are present today, we like to think that Taiwan is not a victim at all, even under current circumstances. So we are here to try to rediscover the truth that Taiwan is actually a powerful player, even now, even under the present circumstances. Not in terms of military prowess, but in terms of what they have already mentioned, resilient power. And the most fundamental is a desire for peace. Without a desire for peace, we can't talk about peace, and nothing else would follow suit or derive from that. So this desire for peace, again, is a moral high ground. So what we're here today, gathered here today, is to try to work out possibilities to win respect for Taiwan, rather than win, rather than keep whining and win sympathy for Taiwan. Only, only if we can, win respect from the world, can we win peace. As we say in Chinese, 得道多助，失道寡助. Gaining virtue, one secures ample camaraderie. Losing virtue, one is left with little camaraderie. In other words, the point is not military prowess, not how to win war. It's not the top priority, but how to win peace. So trying to work toward peace is not to show vulnerability, but in fact it's a practical investment, a risk management that requires wisdom. So we are very happy today that we have invited the 7 fellows here for this forum, because they have brought us a respectable and laudable attitude toward peace, as well as their rich and instructive experience in actually working toward peace. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin our panel, and we will proceed in the order presented in the agenda. Okay. First, we'll have Professor Ota, Yoshitaka Ota, sitting right next to me. He will be talking. He is the currently the director of the Center for Ocean Nexus. He will be talking about a topic actually which is often neglected in the discourses of peace, which is, peace that's related to environmental protection. I think Mr. Tong mentioned actually earlier that, when talking about peace, we need to also think hard about how we, secure peace between the human and the non-human worlds. So, without further ado, let's Professor Ota begin, please.
Ni hao ma. Wu shu. Good enough. Tai zhen yi xiao. So that's pretty much all Chinese that I learned for 1 week. Forgive me for that. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm deeply honored to be invited to this fellowship. As a Japanese scholar, I first would like to acknowledge the colonial history of Japanese imperialism. I know it's usually not talked about, but I'd love to do this. I think our past has made hardship and shaken the Taiwanese society. And shamefully, until I was invited to this honorable fellowship, I didn't know enough about this part of the history. I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Lien Tai, Dr. Lung Tai, and read her book, which really made me realize, how much we need to learn as Japanese. So I pledge here to promote this knowledge, hopefully when I go back to Japan. I usually live in the US, so time to time I go back to Japan, so I'm hoping to talk about it. Secondly, I also recognized this is the land of indigenous heritage. The wisdom, dignity, and the rights of the indigenous people has to be recognized and protected if we are going to talk about inclusive peace. And then not to be exclusive. And I think Taiwan has been making an effort for that. So, being here really to learn about two things: my nation's past and for the future to be inclusive. Well, I am an anthropologist, and particularly called maritime anthropology, which is focused on ocean. So when I was invited, I had no problem talking about Taiwan as much as Japan, because we are all island nations. Ocean plays a huge role in our peace building, especially if we are talking about not just the national security, but the human security, which is a necessary part of our peace. Today, we have environmental security has been talked about at the core of the issue. Taiwan has, and then all entire East Asia, has been suffering for this huge increase of the temperature. Ocean has behaving very strangely. And it is, of course, there is a huge unprecedented pressure will come to this environmental shift. And then unfortunately, and there is a joke among younger generation in the United States, whenever the summer finishes, they will say, I just experienced the coldest summer of my life. Does that mean anything? Unfortunately, the trend will continue. Even if we stopped and reduced the emission, it is not the immediate solution Unfortunately, we have to adapt. But in this adaptation, we need to think about the human security. Most of the time, those environmental pressure, as you can see, goes to the people who are vulnerable, marginalized. It's not about their powerless, but it is their ability to fight against it, where the resource, where the right, where the protections, where the support from those people who are actually creating mainstream climate change narrative. When the climate change narrative mainstream comes, what we all talk about is a fear. And what we talk about is we need to make things better. We have some plan for the future. And it's all true, but it is happening now. First we need to do is a recognition. Recognition of our society being unequal, our society being inequitable. So my study and in my work is pushing social equity in the ocean, which basically means there has been a very unequal world because of the racialization, because of the marginalization, because of the politicization. This, if you call it mental state, but it's more like a political social organization, has to be changed. That's the first step we need to make. So how we can do this? There's 3 things we can do. 1, discredit disruptive narratives, which basically means don't listen to the fearmonger. Listen to the science. Listen to the things which goes to your heart. And be critical all the time. And it is the first things you could do. Second, make a policy and a law to protect everyone. That actually means protect the people who can be ignored, protect the people who has been marginalized, and fight for the isms, misogyny, all these things which actually blind our eyesight to care about the people is something we have to be very critical, and we always have to be aware. People trying to insert those messages when they're mongering your fear. The last one, respect the dignity of the people. We all seek for the data's, numbers and modeling and future predictions scientifically. But in those numbers, there are peoples. In those numbers of the climate change predictions, we need to hear the story. And then those are the story full of the wisdom, full of the care. So, in short, for the peace or peace building, we can do 3 things immediately. We can work together. And I'm going to come back to how to do it later for the particularly Taiwan. But first of all, again, I'd like to thank the foundation, and I'd like to thank my fellows, and I'd like to thank the audience, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ota, for your very succinct words for how concerning how we should immediately proceed with our peace agenda in the area of environmental protection. Secondly, we'll have Ms. Emma Baumhofer from Switzerland and the USA. She is an independent consultant in digital peace building and design. She will be speaking on the topic peace building in a fragmented digital world. Please.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all today and to be with you. It's also been such a pleasure to spend all of these days in the fellowship so far in Taiwan, learning about this island, or islands, rather, I should say. So yeah, thanks very much for that opportunity. So I'm a multidisciplinary designer and consultant, which means I work across art and communications and peace building, but specifically with a focus on technology. And one little fact about me is that I started university in 2004, which was the same year that Facebook launched in the US. So whether I liked it or not, social media ended up having a huge and formative role in my life and also in my career. So I was really part of this first generation of university students. Back then you had to be part of a university that were making these profiles online and starting to think about how we wanted to present ourselves in these public digital spaces. And back then it was also really kind of bizarre and voyeuristic to exchange in these public digital spaces, which is funny now because we're so used to these things. So I come from humanities. I studied anthropology and literature, but because I was based in the Bay Area, I ended up working at tech startups. My first job in Silicon Valley was working for a game that was making, or a company that was making games for Facebook and other social media platforms. So I was managing a community of players where we had millions of monthly average users, and they were dispersed all around the world. And we were making these really fun and engaging digital spaces for people to interact, coming from super different backgrounds. It was really exciting. I also felt, I have to say, proud to be part of this new generation of technologists. We were making a new type of technology, it felt like, connecting people around the world, launching these creative digital tools, and also like working on these shared platforms. At this time, you could actually build your own apps and launch them onto the social media platforms themselves. So it felt super democratic. The barriers were really low. It was creative and it was hopeful. I'll remind you that actually during these years, Obama's slogan was also hope when he was running the first time for president. So basically a totally different world than the one we were living in now. Okay, so if we flash forward 20 years later to today, we have basically more data, I would say. And I think the mood around technology has changed. So probably specifically for social media, but in general for technology. I mean, it's still useful. We still have fun in these digital spaces, but we're worried about things like screen time, mental health crises, exclusion, censorship, the list could go on and on. And now we also see very clearly, more than we did before, the role that some technologies play actually in stealing our time and eroding our trust and increasing our anxiety and exacerbating polarization, unfortunately. We're seeing around the world rampant mis- and disinformation, increased hate speech, ideological division, fragmented communities, and unfortunately, democratic backsliding. It's not only the fault of technology that we're seeing all of these divisions, but there is a key role that technology plays in amplifying these divisions, and also in dramatically changing our information and communication environments. Okay, I have to admit it took me a little while to let go of my technology ideals, but eventually my perspective evolved. I think it's probably a story familiar to many of us of my generation. And so my career kind of evolved along with this changing perspective. So starting out in the private sector, building the technology, moving to working with international organizations to help them use digital technology in their communications, then moving to analyzing how technology is impacting peace and conflict, and now finally adding another layer on top of that, thinking about the role of art and design and really our own personal responsibility in creating and facilitating intentional digital tools and digital spaces. So I think it's for sure now that technology cannot reach its hopeful democratic potential on its own. It's also not neutral. This is a key learning that we've discovered in these last 20 years. We formerly thought of technology as this kind of neutral force. We know now that it's not. And then this responsibility is now with us. So it includes being critical, actually, of these systems that prevent tech from being equitable. So currently, I'm working as an independent consultant. I'm advising all sorts of different partners on topics related to design and digital peace building. I work with different types of partners, including researchers and universities, NGOs, government departments, international organizations like the UN on different projects, collaborating often with mediation and transitional justice and communications teams. A part of this work is also always working with regional experts, so making sure that the kind of general best practices around technology are applied in a locally driven perspective. So the type of work I do could be anything from conducting trainings, building strategies around how to use digital tools, running studies, organizing events, making space for exchange. And I use methodologies like human-centered design, prototyping, asking questions, and listening. Basically, my goal is to help build bridges, so between different groups that share the same values, but they have different terminology or methods that they use. So I help to get the technologists and the peace builders and the policymakers, et cetera, to actually understand each other. So we know that technology can't solve all of our problems. We can forget about this techno-solutionism, but I think it's true that intentional design and facilitation, combined also with our offline efforts in dialogue and communication, they can lead to greater inclusion and democratic deliberation. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to discussing on the panel later today and also the whole day throughout the forum. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Emma, for your sharing of your experience in trying to make technology work as a tool that can facilitate human equity and solidarity. Next, we'll have Ms. Cao Kefei from Switzerland and China. She is currently director of this international performing group called Nomadic, I believe, Minutes, right? Minutes. Nomadic Minutes, based in Berlin. And she will be talking about staging the unspeakable : war, trauma, and performance. Please.
对，我叫曹可飞。我1999年第一次来到台湾，这次是我的第5次。我是看到了台湾很大的变化的。首先，我很荣幸有这样的机会来到这里参与这个论坛。我先讲讲我是从哪里来的。我出生在中国大陆的上海，然后80年代我去了瑞士求学。90年代呢，我大概在瑞士生活了有9年，然后我们搬到了北京。那个时候的大陆正好是经济飞腾的时期，我在那个时候开始了自由的戏剧创作。然后我现在生活在柏林，然后在德语国家和中国之间从事剧场编剧和导演工作，所以我自己跨越不同的文化、时代、体制。那么这样的一个亲身经历，其实是让我质疑任何一种单一的视角的。所以在近20年来，我从多个角度，我编创了一些与历史的记忆、社会现实、女性的处境以及离散经验有关的记录剧场、短片以及一些多媒介的演出。那我现在呢是德国海德堡大学一个叫 Kate Hamburg 中心的驻场艺术家，然后正在发展一个带有国际合作的一个剧场作品。它是以1949年中国内战为背景的，他关注不同的族群中被边缘化、被遗忘的个人故事，尤其是海峡两岸我们两岸民众的生命的经验。我个人希望通过这样的一个过程，能为和平建设做一点点微薄的事情。 那为什么我会选择这样的一个题材呢？我觉得有几个主要的原因。首先，它和我的成长背景有关。我说过，我来自上海，所以我从小受的教育，我读的书，我看的影视，我们常常把这场内战看成是一个胜利与解放来纪念的。所以我去了国外以后，我在瑞士以后，我就有很多的疑问，我就想搞清楚当时究竟发生了什么，而这个搞清楚的过程是一个漫长的过程。还有让我一个非常震动的阅读经验，就是多年前我读到作家龙应台2009年出版的纪实作品《大江大海1949》。令我印象深刻的是，作者超越了单一的政治立场，他把文献资料、访谈、个人的家族史和其他不同族群背景的个人历史经验，他来揭示出这场内战历史的多重面貌以及它的复杂性。他让我意识到，战争机器一旦启动了，最终是没有胜利者的，战争只有幸存者。好，另外一个经验是来自于我个人的，在柏林生活以后和一些从战争中逃亡出来人的直接的相遇。那么就是2016年，我在柏林给来自叙利亚、阿富汗、伊拉克的难民青少年组织了一次为期4个月的表演工作坊。当时我在一个难民营那里收容了有1800多人，我每周去那里，就是说跟他们做游戏啊，然后也跟他们去玩啊，其实是通过这个来建立和他们之间的信任，也让他们的生活能够得到一定的秩序。在这个期间，我发现这些年幼的生命已经经历了多少的创伤了。好，再讲到2022年，那个时候我在西柏林一个捐助点，也在柏林的火车站，我看到非常多来自于乌克兰的逃亡者，他们是老人、孩子和女性的母亲，对，里边几乎没有什么那个中年男人，这些缺失的人，他们是家庭中的儿子、父亲、丈夫。那么他们留在了自己的家乡，用他们自己的生命来抵抗侵略者。但是我从那些逃亡者的人的眼神里看到他们的悲伤。好，那么就说剧场是什么？我记得那个在书中《大江大海1949》的书中说，有人说他们是战争的失败者，那么所有被时代践踏、侮辱、伤害的人都是。所以我在这里，我愿意呼唤一个失败者的剧场，也就是说，舞台是为无名者、边缘者、被历史遗忘的人发生的，他们的记忆必须重新进入到我们公共的对话之中。当然，艺术解答不了任何就没有办法给出答案，但是艺术意味着差异，意味着让不同立场的人创造一个彼此倾听、彼此看见的机会，因为只有这样我们才能真正的对话，这样我们才能找到我们的尊严。我渴望和平。谢谢大家。
好，谢谢，非常感谢曹克飞女士跟我们分享她如何透过剧场让这些被遗忘的、被伤害的人能够让自己的故事呈现出来，并且经由此促成对话以及最终的和平的可能性。好，非常感谢。Next we'll have Benjamin Abdon from France. He is the founder of the European grassroots anti-racist movement, and he will be speaking today on walking with the children of war.
Thank you very much for the welcome, and thank you very much for the invitation here. I was born in Paris, but my parents were born in Morocco, where my family had lived for several centuries. In the 60s, like all Jews in Arab and Muslim countries, they were pushed away because they were Jews. My father left Marrakesh to study in France. After her first year in high school, my mother left Casablanca for Israel, which was the only refuge for those who had nowhere else to go. Later, they met and settled down together in Paris. My paternal grandfather, whom you can see in the picture here, was responsible for funeral services in Marrakesh as a volunteer. He supported all Beret family, regardless of their social status. In France, he was lost. He spoke only Arabic. We, his grandchildren, only spoke French. My grandmother and my parents translated him. The stories that he used to tell about the old country during traditional family gatherings made me understand how the values of dignity and respect are tied to caring for others, regardless of their identity and social status. These family gatherings, the rarity of my name, the fact that we never mixed dairy and meat products, the Hebrew and Arabic discussions between my parents, and the special traditional holidays that we celebrated at home sparked my early reflections about my identity. What does that mean to be French? To be a Jew? A child of migrants? What is the Moroccan part of my identity? And what does that mean to me? In 2004, I am a student when I meet a young survivor of the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. In a Parisian cafe, she tells me about her story of extermination and of survival. She's different from me. An African, a Christian, an orphan, but she's the same. Someone driven by values and determined to build a better future. I realize that there are hundreds of thousands of survivors who need support. Therefore, I invent the concept of dialogue of memories, according to which the heirs of violence in the past should not be in competition, but in dialogue, and come together to promote human rights today. I lead delegations to Rwanda, and I create bridges between young people from both sides. Over the 20 years that I followed, I've helped people with diverse identities reclaim their dignity. Refugees from Africa, Syria and Afghanistan, Roma people facing discrimination, Palestinian, Israeli and French Jewish students meeting for peace, Turkish people commemorating the Armenian genocide, Kurds, Rohingyas and Uyghurs facing persecution, and Ukrainian refugees and children. In 2020, because of COVID, I'm stuck in the US. I decided to develop an oral genealogy of my family through long phone calls with my parents. I discover how much I ignore, and I feel the stories of Moroccan Jews are on the verge of being erased because of silence in the family about the past. In 2021, when I returned to France for a few weeks, I started interviewing my relatives who were born in Morocco. I am now writing a collection of their life stories. For me, it is a way to restore their dignity and to help my generation know more about the legacies we receive. I believe this gives us more freedom to decide what to preserve, what to leave aside, and what to transform. The same year, I cannot go back to the US directly from France because Europe is in a pandemic red zone, so I decide to spend 2 weeks in Morocco. My parents decide to join. My father had not been there for 18 years, and my mother for about 50 years. But the peace agreement between Morocco and Israel, with full mutual recognition, has given them the confidence to finally undertake this memory trip. Later you will see pictures of my father on his maternal grandfather's tomb in Marrakesh, And you will also see a picture of my mother pointing at her childhood apartment in Casablanca, then me in front of the streets. Since I arrived in Taiwan, I have had many discussions about identity and the past. Difficult questions have emerged. What does it mean to be Taiwanese? What is the Chinese part of one's identity? What does this Chinese identity mean today? What is one's relation to mainland China? How to share individual reflections about identity while respecting the importance of the group. How to speak about violent events that took place here in Taiwan in the past, including during white terror and martial law, without breaking harmony. How can we know when we have reached a point in the discussion that is good enough and we should stop in order to avoid triggering violent reactions? To these difficult questions, I have no easy answer, but I can share examples that may inspire you. I trust you who are already finding ways and your own ways to address them. And I'm here to offer solidarity in action so we can work together today and tomorrow to create a better, more dignified place for our generations and those who follow us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Boyaman, for your sharing as to how, starting from your very mixed background, you have proceeded to try to create opportunities for people, apparently, hostile groups, actually, to understand each other and reconcile with each other. And I think that one very important message occurs at the end of his speech, when he said, we need to talk about this historical, traumatic, violent experience without breaking harmony. Thank you. Next, we'll have Daniela Segovia from Venezuela. She is the coordinator of partnerships and research. She's the partnership and research coordinator as well as Refugee Self Reliance Initiative, Latin America. She will be talking about the thin line, when everyone can become a refugee. Please.
Thank you very much for having us here. Ni hao me. Thank you. Gracias. My name is Daniela Segovia. I am from Venezuela in South America. I am a former diplomat, a political scientist by training, and a policy maker. But more than titles, I carry a story shaped by movement, reinvention, and a deep commitment to human rights. Well, I came from a country who used to receive thousands of migrants and refugees. So I began my journey in international affairs more than 20 years ago in 2001 as an intern in the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in my hometown in Caracas. I just started university and suddenly I saw this kind of situation. I found myself face to face with the reality, the stark reality of Colombian refugees who had fled violence and crossed into my country seeking safety. That experience showed me that displacement is not just about borders. It's about dignity, survival, and the quiet strength of those forced to start over. I still remember the stories they shared, stories of families torn apart, women rebuilding their lives with nothing but courage and hope. Those moments stayed with me, shaped the way I see policy, because it's not just paperwork, but it's a tool to protect lives. So there is lives, human lives, beyond statistics, as you mentioned before. So being one of the statistics of Venezuelan living abroad, I moved to Mexico in 2018 So thank you, Mexico, for receiving me. And after working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in my home country for more than a decade, I had to reframe my professional and personal life in a new context. I never imagined that, but 20 years later, of being an intern in my hometown in Caracas in the UN Agency for Refugees, I returned to the agency, but this time in Mexico, and working alongside this kind of forced displacement of so many Venezuelans, my own people. The role have shifted, the borders have changed, but the pain is familiar, and so is the urgency. Today, I stand here not just as a professional, but as someone who has seen both sides of displacement, who has listened, learned, and committed to building systems that center dignity, inclusion, and leadership from those most affected. Because displacement is not just a challenge to be managed, it's a call to reimagine how we respond, how we collaborate, and how we honor the stories that too often go unheard. That is what brought me here. So, starting over wasn't easy. I arrived in Mexico with no social capital, no network, no roadmap, but I was determined to keep advocating for human rights. I reinvented myself, working as a lecturer, policy analyst, and eventually as a humanitarian practitioner. I wasn't afraid to jump between fields, academia, media, NGOs, and international organizations, and build my own bridges. In Mexico, I worked directly with a displaced population, also from Haiti, Cuba, Central America, and beyond. And I was in charge of the legal orientation in the field in Mexico City for people arriving through the Darien Gap in Panama, and coordinated also UN interagency platform for Venezuelans, R4B, and I could saw firsthand the complexity of human mobility and also the resilience of those who navigated. Today, I am part of the Refugee Self Reliance Initiative, supporting refugee-led organizations across Latin America, because I believe those closest to the crisis must be at the center of the solution. We need to move beyond top-down models and invest in leadership from within displaced communities. My story is not unique. It's one of millions, but I share it today because I believe that policy must be wrought in lived experience. And that inclusion is not just a principle. It's a practice. It's something we build every single day, in every space like this one, with every voice. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for your sharing of your experience in making good use of both your experience in the negotiation table, as well as your hardcore experience in actual practice in salvaging the dignity of the displaced people. And you speak especially to my past experience, because I was like Ms. Long, we both served as the director of culture of the city. So we know how important policy is in terms of intervening into, the lives of these displaced people. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Roy Zilberberg from Israel. He's currently the director of the School for Peace, Wahat al-Salam-Neve Shalom. And he will speak on a field of thorns, surviving conflict, seeking peace. Please.
Thank you, everybody. First, I want to share my respect for you for investing a Saturday nice day in coming and discussing and hearing about peace. I suspect you understand that this is not an easy walk and that it involves a lot of resistance. So for that, I feel we share something. In my context, in the Israeli-Palestinian context, the word peace was used and abused, mainly by those that say they want peace, but usually want to control the other. For them, the situation in which they hold the power and they feel secure, they call it peace. This was the situation before the 7th of October attack by Hamas, with Israel controlling every aspect of Palestinian life, including the siege and blockade of Gaza, not allowing any normal life. Not that I justify the Hamas attack murdering civilians. Since then, for almost 2 years, we are in a situation I don't know what word to use in order to describe. Is it a war? Ethnic cleansing? Genocide? There is a lot of discussion on the word genocide. And it was also taken up by the ICC, the International Criminal Court. I don't know what they will decide, but I want to share why I use this word when I use it. There are 2 reasons for that. I want to make clear that the situation is so bad and unlawful against international law that it requires international intervention. If you know what is happening and you do nothing, you become a part of it. It is relevant for everyone, also for Taiwan. The second reason is accountability. This will not finish when the war will finish. We would have to find a way to address these crimes and treat the perpetrators and the victims in the right way. As for peace, finishing this war doesn't mean peace. We would have to continue trying to create the conditions for peace. People in my region still hold the fantasy that they could live in the region like they are alone, without considering the political wish of the other side. For me, the only lesson can be learned from the 7th of October attack and everything that happens after that is that Israelis could never live in safety and security by mainly using military force and oppression. Sadly, many in Israel don't feel like this. So, this is not the time to discuss political solution. Whether we are for one-state solution, 2 states, or other solutions, it is the time to invest in creating trust and understanding between the 2 people. The time, after this war is over. Now, we must all do what we can to stop the killing. And I want to share something that is very dominant in my position, in my community, in my society. Right after the 7th of October attack, we sent a newsletter to our community sharing feelings and condolences and understanding that we are in a very bad situation. And I received a message from my relative saying, I am very angry with you about what you wrote. I don't feel we need to talk anymore. And I was like, Papi, is this you? Did someone took control of your WhatsApp? And she answered, no, it's me, and I'm very angry. So we talked all night, and apparently her son was in the army at that time, and there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis recruited to the army at that time, and probably going to Gaza. And she told me that the most thing that upset her was that I wrote that in Israeli society there is a feeling of revenge. And that by saying this, I'm turning against Israel. I am making us weaker. And it took a lot of time for me to explain how I am trying to make our society stronger, and that we're in disagreement at this point. Now, almost 2 years later, we are still talking. We don't agree about everything, but I told you this story to make the point that the only way that we can strive in our communities, that we can work for peace, is to talk. And we must find a way to talk to everybody, or almost to everybody in our communities. Thank you, and with respect.
Thank you very much, Roy. I must say that I have to salute you for your courage to speak out. What's happening in Gaza has been tremendously distorted by the world's dominant media, and it is very difficult actually for the ordinary people to understand what's going on now. So we need someone from there to be the witness for us. And I admire especially what he says, what you said at the very end of your speech, that we must find a way to talk. And revenge, a sentiment of revenge and hatred will never bring peace, except for more and more catastrophes. Thank you very much, Roy. And our last speaker is Hazem Almassary from Gaza and in Palestine. He is currently a postdoctoral researcher at National Taiwan University, and he is also an author of many important essays. He will be speaking on The Day My Home Was Lost, a personal reckoning. Please.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. You, Dr. Long, thank you so much for your efforts in promoting peace. And I want to thank the wonderful team for taking care of every detail in this fellowship and the event. And thanks for inviting me to talk about peace through my personal losses, to talk about my mother, and to talk about our house. As you can see in the title of my speech. And I prepared this speech and I printed it out last night. But today, when I woke up in the early morning, I thought about it. And I found it strange to talk about my mother, a person who you don't know, and to talk about our home that doesn't exist anymore, except in my memories. So I have decided to talk or to focus about peace. Peace that everyone wants. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone, no exception. For me as a Palestinian, I believe that Israel wants peace. Bibi Netanyahu wants peace. We, of course, the Palestinians, want peace. Russia wants peace. Ukraine wants peace. China wants peace. And Taiwan wants peace too. So the question is not about who wants or who doesn't want peace. The question is peace based on what? What kind of peace we are looking for and how to bring about peace? Is it based on defeating you, subjugating you, and keeping you under my control? Or is it based on justice, equality, freedom, and dignity that makes everyone win? And here, I must confess, I am deeply skeptical of the word peace. Because peace that I always hear about means pacification and destabilization of the occupation rather than liberation of the occupied people. The peace that I always hear about makes the peace negotiations to turn to be a peace process, endless process. And the occupied people are asked to wait and to be quiet and not to resist, to not disturb peace, while the occupier continues expanding settlements, continues demolishing houses, continues confiscating properties and lands, continues murdering and spreading checkpoints. I am skeptical of the word peace because the occupiers say publicly, we will not allow establishing Palestinian state. And if the occupied people question the legitimacy of the occupier, they take it as evidence of not interested in peace. And they say, we don't have a peace partner. I am skeptical of the word peace because lives are not equal. Our lives as the occupied people are less than the animals' lives. And the occupier lives are high value. For the world, occupation and displacement and throwing people in refugee camps, and now genocide and starvation, not a big deal. All of these are not big deal. The most tragic part of the story is the hostages. I am skeptical of the word peace because when we demand international investigation for any crimes or any massacre happen, they say, no, it will not help peace. It will confine peace efforts. I am skeptical of the word peace because they always hold peace conferences, but to discuss our subjugation, not to discuss our liberation. And now they started to discuss our annihilation and expulsion. Despite all of that, I still believe in peace. We still believe in peace, and we really want peace. You may say, you just said everyone wants peace. what makes you special. Actually, we are not special. We are not special. And we don't want to be special. We are tired of being special. Our bodies are tired from waiting in long queues at the checkpoints and from running after documents and permits that could expire in overnight. Our hearts are dismembered when we see our beloved ones, being murdered with no chance of suing the murderers. But you see the murderers welcomed by the world leaders, considering them partners in fighting terrorism. We want peace because our minds are exhausted from thinking about the future of our children and from thinking about the answer. Why? Why this blatant double standard? We want peace because we are tired from trying to convince the world we don't care about the identity, the religious identity of anyone. We only care about their behavior with us. We want peace because we are tired from trying to calm down the anger of distant people in Taipei, Tokyo, Johannesburg, or New York when they hear us talking about our losses and our story. They are angry. We want peace because we are the side who heavily suffers from the absence of peace. We think that's enough. Enough.
Thank you very much, Hazem, for speaking to us your hearts. This is the words from the bottom of the heart of someone who's from a people who has been oppressed for a long time and who's telling us that in longing for peace they have been actually put into this limbo of waiting, and in the end nothing actually comes by. He's making a very serious call here for us to reinvestigate the idea of peace. Thank you very much. Next, we will have maybe 10 minutes of discussion among the panelists. Would you like to talk to each other? Anyone would like to begin? Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. So, thanks a lot, my colleagues. Many of you talked about dignity, and many of you talked about there is a strategy needed and then dialogue needed. But in your situation, perhaps we can just talk about, what kind of dialogue are we trying to promote here in Taiwan? Shall we just talk about a peace game, or shall we talk about, what should be inclusive form of the peace? We've been here about a week learning about the history. What's your thinking about how we should talk about peace? I mean, in my case, the recognition of diversity here and also colonial history was really the first step I have to make. And often, in my country as well, we don't really do the recognition and acknowledgement. But that's really because people feel uncomfortable. Potentially what I feel about is what's most important is really just open up the dialogue, which everybody feels a little uncomfortable, but something must be talked about. So I'm just going to pass it to any of you.
So respond.
Thank you, Hazem, for your strong words. It really touched something. It really touched me. Regarding the peace games, I feel they are not like war games. You don't want to win. Or more importantly, you don't want to beat the other side. The goal of the peace games is to be as truthful, as honest, as exposed that you can, and to become with a better understanding of the other, and to have care for the other, not only understanding their perspective, but also caring they will achieve what they want. And this maybe, and hopefully, would create trust. And then both win the peace game.
Okay, maybe I ask Ota, Yoshitaka a question. I actually forgot to thank you for trying to reach out toward us as in terms of apologizing for the colonial violence that the colonial government has done to the Taiwanese people, because that rarely happened. Even actually people in Taiwan have been, maybe even a majority of the people here, they actually thought about the colonial times as a purely in positive terms, strangely. Okay, so how would you address this kind of phenomenon? The Taiwanese, maybe not majority, a significant number of the people here. How would you, as a Japanese, how would you like to talk to these people?
That's quite tough, honestly. In terms of history, even the ongoing stuff, the recognizing the violence and the conflict is always difficult. And it makes it really difficult for us to have even the plan for the future. So people wanted to not talk about it and then just move on. But that really doesn't give us enough relationship, which we can really trust each other. So, that's the only way I believe we can do. In a world like this, perhaps that would be a really good start.
Thank you very much. Any other, dialogue initiatives? Angeman, I'm interested in your background very much. I heard that your ancestry also include the Berber people, right? So, can you explain a little more on how that part of your identity motivated you into doing what you have been doing later?
Sure, thank you. Okay, shortly, the Berber are, let's say, a minority, used to be the indigenous people in North Africa before the Arab colonization, and they've been pushed down south in Morocco, in Algeria. I called Berber in Morocco, Kabyle in Algeria. Very, very long and complex story, very, very short. But I feel that my family comes from the south of Morocco, which is kind of the Berber country. And when there is a deep shared culture between all the people there. A lot of people see Jews and Muslims, which is true there, but also there is an underlying and underdog shared culture, which is a Berber one. So I feel, having received legacies of a lot of stories of, at some point, being pushed away from the country, but also cooperation, but also shared culture, what I received were a lot of stories of complexities, and through which it's possible to be in a situation of conflict and cooperation at the same time. I've also received from these stories that I heard the fact that political events can have deep and lasting consequences on the lives of individuals for several generations. And what to do out of these legacies and out of these conflicts, the values that have been passed on to me through my family, also through school in France, through people whom I met during my education, have allowed me to find as the solution not the continuation of conflict and not defeating another side, one generation after another, but on the contrary, to find ways to acknowledge the past in order to build something together in this new frame in which we are in France and in Europe. So that's the, let's say, the energy that I've been trying to use from what I've received in the past.
Okay. Since we are here in Taiwan, I understand the anxiety that Taiwanese people live in. They have the anxiety of something that could happen. It's different from my country's situation, as we live in a certainty of something we can't stop. But the terminology here is very important when you discuss the threat that Taiwan lives under. They need to be precise about it. I heard some Taiwanese or even international media say China is a threat. Okay, we need to be precise and to say China is not a threat. The war that could launch by China is the threat. So we cannot push China away. We can push the war away from Taiwan. It's impossible to push China away. So from this point, we have something we can prevent. We can prevent. The war can be prevented. By how? By building more bridges with China and open more peace channels. I don't know. I am a foreigner here in Taiwan. Some think it's impossible to have any kind of these channels, but this is the only way to prevent the potential war that could happen. And we, or Taiwanese, I need to mind the lines here in Taiwan. As a foreigner, I cannot cross the line. They need to mind that the threat that we have here is the war, and they have a high chance to push it away by more easy channels, but not attacking. Of course, building your military capability is very important to protect yourself. Is very important, but don't heavily rely on it, and don't heavily rely on your allies that they could support you during the war. The goal is to prevent the war from the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes left for question and answer. Now the floor is open. 你们各位可以用中文问问题，也没有问题。好 ，Miss Long.
Hazem, do you have your earphone on so that I can say it in Chinese? Yeah. 来自加萨的 Hazem 已经在台湾生活了 Are you there? 已经生活了9年，将近10年。那在加萨的非常悲惨的现在正在发生的历史情景，在发生的过程里头，他失去了自己的家人，也失去了他的母亲。那以这样的前景来看，很可能是纳坦雅胡要做的是赶尽杀绝， 就是把所有的还没有死的加萨人毁了所有的建筑之后，把他们推到埃及的边境，迫使埃及不得不把门打开来接收难民。换句话说，你会变成一个无家的人，无家无国的人。那也可能你会在台湾生活很久，也很可能台湾变成你未来的家。我想要听你说一下，你觉得生活在台湾特别的寂寞吗？因为大多数的人不太了解，也不十分的关心你的处境。问题2是，如果你今天有这样一个机会来告诉台湾人一句话，来让人们更了解加萨人现在的处境，那一句话是什么？
Thank you, Dr. Lang, for the questions. To be honest, yes, I feel lonely in Taiwan. I feel lonely. First, because the differences in cultures and in many aspects, also in language. I am not good at learning languages. This is one big mistake actually in Taiwan. Of course, I don't blame Taiwanese. I blame myself here. Of course, the culture, everything is different here from me. But Taiwan gave me a safe place, even before the genocide. Give me a safe place, give me an opportunity to pursue my PhD and then work. So I put it into account when I think about Taiwan. Because of that, before the genocide, I considered Taiwan my home, my second home. But here, the nature of the people, they don't have interest in politics in general, even though they live in very hot area in the world. But in general, they don't have such interest in politics. For example, when we were children, we have interest in politics even worldwide. I used to hear the news from distant countries, news or conflicts. When I was a child, when I was only 8 or 9 or 10 years, because politics influence our life heavily. But here in Taiwan, the good thing, politics didn't affect their life yet. They still live their life normally, without any problem. That is a very important point that makes the difference. And in general, they don't have interest in politics, and they don't have interest in the Middle East issues. And unfortunately, those have interest. They don't look at our issue as a separate issue. They connected it with the alliance, with the system of alliance, with the U.S. Israel is part of the U.S. Alliance system with the West, and Taiwan in the same camp. So they think it's their obligation to support the members of in this camp, including Israel. So I hear or I saw articles and social media posts that promote supporting Israel as they are with Taiwan on the same camp. This is the point about living in Taiwan here. And the second question, if I want to say something to Taiwanese about Gaza, I believe that what's happening now in Gaza and Taiwan issue, they have the same point. Both of us, we have struggled. We are struggling against domination. We are struggling against the Israel domination, and Taiwan wants to get its independence. It's very important. They may compare Taiwan or not compare. They consider Taiwan is like Israel in terms of innovation and something like this. I think all of these are minor issues, are not important. But the main issue is to get your independence. It's to get your self-determination. This is the most similarity between Taiwan and Palestine. Both of them, they want to get their independence. Thank you.
One more question, the last question, because we're running out of time. 下一个问题。那位后面那位男士先举手的。This gentleman, yeah.
My question is to Roy. I've got quite a few friends that do something very similar to you. One of them, as an example, lives in the UK. I'm not going to say his name. His name's Ben, but I'm not going to say his surname. He's with Combatants for Peace. And he's told us things in terms of how you, or people that do things like you, are perceived in Israel by the society. Can you tell us a bit more in terms of how you are perceived by the people around you, in terms of you differing? Sorry, my question is for Roy. I've got quite a few friends that do things similar to you. Very recently, I spoke to a friend called Ben who's with Combatants for Peace. His family are Israeli. They basically stopped talking to him. He lives in the UK. My question is just, how, Jed, do you feel you are perceived in Israeli society based on your views and what you do, and how you're probably very different from the mainstream view? That's it.
Hi. It's complicated, but I'll answer in short. Israeli society is not one thing, and it's going through also a process of radicalization, and for sure there are large parts of the society that consider me a traitor, an outsider, and not a legitimate voice. And there are others who maybe consider it a legitimate voice but don't agree. For me, it's very important to be in discussion with society, even if there are big gaps between us. I'm not talking so people in Taiwan would like me. I am mainly talking to try to influence my society. And that's it for now.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent and very enriching and touching sharing. We're running out of time, so we'll have to end here. But in the afternoon, we will have, I think, all our important points further discussed in greater detail. So please come back. Thank you very much. Thank you again.